Whew. I know that people have talked about this through the day. Donald Trump's meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, which I brought to you live actually last night. Donald Trump had jaws dropping when he says that he wants the United States to own Gaza and rebuild it. He wants all the people that are there, the Palestinian people that are there, 2.1 million, to go away, to be removed, and by the sounds of it, to never return, right? So you're talking about just getting rid of all these people. And they don't want to go, right? I mean, even if 1 million of them wanted to go, even if half the population said, do you know what, I've had enough of this dump, I'm off, right? I've had enough of being shot at, I don't want to be here anymore, I'm leaving. You'd still have 1.23 million people for whom that is their home and they don't want to go. So what is Trump's plan? Is this even a plan? You know, he said there could be 1, 2, 3, 12, 4, 7 areas where these people could go to. It's not formed, it's just words. But it is causing problems and it could disrupt the ceasefire. Because if Hamas think they've got nothing to lose or nothing to gain, more like, from peace, what do you think's going to happen? And actually, that would play right into the hands of some of the very fundamentalist Jewish people in Israel who want to finish the job. So Saudi Arabia said no. This isn't going to happen. It's a two-state solution or no solution at all, and we don't make friends with Israel. Jordan, Egypt have said no. We don't want any more people. We've got enough problems of our own. So what is going on here? What are the implications of it? And how far could this go? I mean, is he using this like tariffs to make sure that maybe Hamas come to the table? I don't know. Or was he just saying what he wanted his friend to hear? You know those people who go, oh no, you look great in that. No, you're brilliant. And they're only just saying it because they want you to feel good. Well, let's find out what the repercussions could be for all of this. Jamil Jaffer joins me now, I'm thrilled to say, Executive Director at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. Good evening to you. Another day, another bombshell from your president. I'm not holding you personally responsible, but he is your president. You can deal with him. I don't even know where to start with this. I mean, where do you start with this? It is so shocking that I'm literally gobsmacked.
Well, Petri, I think the thing you need to know is that most people around the president, including his cabinet members, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, key members on Capitol Hill, they were all as surprised as you are, gobsmacked as you are. Apparently, a couple of his closest advisors, Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, and Steve Witkoff, who's been his negotiator there in the Middle East, both of them were aware of this idea that it's been percolating around in the president's mind, but no information had been transmitted to anybody else. I think even from Prime Minister Netanyahu, this might have been the first time he heard it as well. And to be frank, it's not clear the president knows exactly what the terms are either, because on one hand, yesterday, in response to questions, he said, yes, they'll be moving out permanently. The U.S. will be taking over. We're going to build the Riviera of the Middle East. But then today, the staff walked it back and said, well, the Palestinians will temporarily leave while it's rebuilt, then they'll return. Those are very different scenarios, Petri. And so, you know, even the latter is problematic, but it's definitely very different than a permanent displacement somewhere else. And then, of course, the president says, well, they're going to go to Jordan, they're going to go to Egypt. Neither country is willing to take them. That's a separate and larger problem when it comes to the Palestinian issue, because neither of those countries have been willing to step up and do their part in this peace settlement either. And so the real question is, how do you get this thing unlocked? And maybe, Petri, what this is an effort by Donald Trump to say something so crazy that, you know, the what used to be the crazy idea is now the middle ground, and maybe you find a path forward that's actually doable. He did it, to be fair to him. He did with Abraham Accords, which I and most people thought were not doable. He did do that. So, you know, there's a precedent here.
Okay, but, you know, you're talking about imposing Donald Trump's world on the world. And you know, a lot of countries like Egypt and Jordan and even Saudi Arabia, who it was hinted would pay for all of this, you know, they have a say. I mean, what doesn't Donald Trump understand? And look, he's not just playing with words. He's not just this sort of Machiavellian clown that people are just going to go, oh, this is entertaining. People's lives are at stake here. And if Hamas decide that he means this, they have got nothing to gain from peace. They have nothing to gain from protecting those hostages. He is not just allowed to play the fool.
No, you're exactly right. The problem, of course, is Hamas has already decided peace is not in its best interests. It has regularly put the lives of the Palestinian people at risk over and over and over again. It is Hamas's fault that we're in this war. It's Hamas's fault that the Palestinian civilians have died. They're the ones who hid weapons and capabilities inside hospitals and schools. And so, look, I don't disagree with you. Donald Trump doesn't have the right to play with people's lives. At the same time, you know, look, he has managed to, push Colombia around on taking American migrants. He's pushed Mexico and Canada around into doing more. The question of how much more is debatable. He's pushed Denmark. Well, he's pushed Denmark into agreeing to allow a U.S. security presence in Greenland. Now, so his tactic, terrible and as challenging as it may be, does appear to be working, right? And, you know, for all the people complaining about what he's doing with USAID, and I'm very troubled by it, I'm very deeply concerned about it, right? He's having an impact, good or bad. He's doing stuff. And this is the one thing I think that everyone needs to take account of with Donald Trump, which is you may like him, you may hate him, right? You may think he's crazy, you may think he's brilliant. You know, I don't know how many people think he's brilliant, but he definitely has his finger on the pulse of the American people, if nothing else, right? And I will say this: when he tells you he's going to do something, he sort of does it. It's kind of unlike a lot of other leaders.
Actually, Jamil, I'm going to disagree with you there. I disagree with you there. When he says he's going to do something, he's not doing it. Yeah. You know, and the little boy that cries wolf eventually will not be heard. This bombastic bullying of other sovereign nations will not stand if he picks a fight with the wrong person. And at the moment, he is just hacking off the world and saying America first and saying we're going to build this big, beautiful place and it's going to be the Riviera of the Middle East. Keep your nose out. It's not yours. I thought you were being isolationist. Stick with that. You want to ruin your own country. You've been voted for. We can't stop you from doing that. But stop it. He's now involved in South Africa. Keep your nose out.
Well, let's talk about the Israel-Palestinian situation, right? I don't think that there's a very realistic solution. Whatever that solution looks like, a two-state solution, whatever it might be, there is no realistic solution to that problem without the U.S. being heavily and actively involved in it. The question is, what kind of involvement? Maybe this is not the kind of involvement people want, right? Maybe this is the wrong idea. You know, remove people from Gaza. I mean, that nobody's ever talked about that because it's so off the beaten path. It's so off the charts. Nobody can imagine actually doing that. Resettlement.
Can I just add? It's so illegal. Yeah. It's not just a wacky, weird idea. Right. It's illegal. Sorry.
That's right. They're right. Well, if we're in a war, that's right. It is illegal to force displace people. This is a close analogy to it because there's a war going on, right? Now, if the analogy is, well, we're going to remove them to rebuild and then they can come back, that's a different story. But that's not what he said last night, to be clear. He said the opposite in response to questions. He said, no. They'll move out. They'll go to Egypt. They'll go to Saudi Arabia. They'll go to Jordan. And then we'll bring the people of the world into this new Riviera. You can almost see him running the numbers of the Trump Tower that would be built on this new Riviera. But of course, that's not now what the White House staff is saying. That's not what Marco Rubio said today. Today, they both said, the White House press secretary and Marco Rubio, what the president meant was, you know, that the Palestinians will leave and then come back. Now, this is not unusual. We saw the same thing with Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden, where Joe Biden would say, we're going to defend Taiwan with military forces. Jake Sullivan would come to the podium the next day and say, what the president meant was, we'll send weapons. So this kind of two-sided talk for administrations is not unusual. This is an extreme idea and one that it appears not a lot of people are big fans of.
Particularly the Palestinian people.
Who are
the only ones that really matter. I'm just trying to think if Trump had his eye on London and said, right, you lot get out, how we'd feel about it. It's interesting to me, though, that Saudi Arabia, on the country that Donald Trump is really relying on to get these accords sorted, these friendships with Israel. Some would argue that's why Hamas did what they did on October the 7th, because they wanted to destabilise that. They didn't want Israel butting up and making friends. Saudi Arabia has come out and said, it's a two-state solution, and that's the only way we're going to be friends with Israel. So already Donald Trump is been hopefully put in his place, although I don't think he'll say it that way.
Yeah, I don't think he will see it that way. And I do think the Saudis are, I guess what I would say is I think the Saudis are negotiating now, right? So the question is, what does the two-state solution look like? Does it mean just the West Bank? Does it mean the West Bank and Gaza together? Does it mean a strip connecting the two? How are those two areas secured? How does Israel get its security? These are all questions that have been debated for 40 years, right? Everyone knows the basic tenets of a two-state solution look like 67 borders with land swaps, probably no right of return for the Palestinians being realistic, some amount of compensation, and some discussion about the final status of Jerusalem. But now putting on the table, no Gaza, right? Is that still a two-state solution? Again, forced displacement of people is not something the world has ever thought was lawful or appropriate. Right. So the question is, can there be a negotiated solution that involves some amount of transfer of land? And then the question is, who takes what people and what land? And will all the parties, whether that's Hamas, the Palestinian people, the Israelis, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the United States, everyone involved, can they get to a deal? And maybe throwing something insane like this out there is a tactic in trying to get something done.
It didn't sound like a tactic. He was getting very excited about it. It didn't. And everyone's going to say that, oh, he didn't mean it. And by the way, it's going to take 21 years to clear Gaza.
Well, speaking of that,
before you start building on it. So how long are these people supposed to just go and live somewhere else? Do you know what I mean? This is not thought through. He was very excited about this idea.
That's right. And if you think about it, if you look at just the evacuation from Afghanistan, right, and what a disaster that was, and you look at the Israelis' withdrawal from the West, from Gaza Strip last time when they brought all their people out and destroyed the settlements, right, and bulldozed their old settlements, right? You look at what the disaster that was. You saw Israeli soldiers pulling old men and women out of these things. That's what the Gaza exit's going to look like if the President Trump pulls off what he's saying. That's going to take a lot of American troops he said he won't put on the ground, or generally has said he wouldn't put on the ground. And it's hard to imagine how that goes well. It seems like a disaster waiting to happen. It's almost impossible to pull off without a lot of lives being lost and a lot of threats to Americans. And so I don't think Donald Trump's going to be able to pull that one off. He's got a different thing coming. He's got to figure out how to do this in a way that's conceivable. I don't think he's really thought this through all the way.
Yeah. Well, he'll just move on to another ethnic cleansing deal somewhere else, perhaps. Who knows? Who knows what tomorrow will bring? And that's the joy and the fear of the Trump presidency. Jamil, it's always a delight to talk to you. You've got your work cut out over the next 4 years, and no doubt we'll speak again. Thank you very much indeed. Executive Director at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. I'm back in a sec.